I'm standing here in mid-June in a well-established stand of big bluestem, and as you can see, it produces an abundant amount of high-quality, fine-leaved forage that produces excellent gain on cattle with very little input and is very drought-tolerant. Taken all together, that tells us this is a great complement to our cool season grasses here in the tall fescue belt. The challenge, of course, is getting this established. How do we do that? With all native grasses and all perennial grasses, it's essential that we have a high-quality seed bed and do an excellent job of competition control. If we can take care of those two things, we can have a very high probability of establishing stands like you see here. When you plan to establish native grasses, one of the first choices you will have to make is picking a site. If you have the option, choose fields where past management has suppressed weeds. For example, production of row crops such as soybeans, corn, and cotton over several years can lead to reduced weed populations. New ground, land that has been recently cleared, also typically has limited weed pressure and is a good option as well. On the other hand, hay and pasture fields can be much more of a problem because of their well-developed weed seed banks. In pastures and hay fields where Bermuda grass has encroached, you will need to use more aggressive control measures, or in more extreme cases, consider alternate sites. So let's look at some of these options. In recent years, the way we've planted soybeans is using very often Roundup Ready material, which allows us to suppress weeds throughout the growing season. Because of that, it makes an excellent environment to plant native grasses. So we can see these soybeans here are really very clean, not a lot of weed pressure. And so if you know ahead of time that you want to plant a particular field to native grasses and you have the opportunity to use a rotation of soybeans, it can be an excellent tool to help clean up the weeds in that field. Conversely, if you have a field that's already in soybeans and you're thinking about putting it into pasture, that's an excellent choice because of how clean the fields typically are. If you do decide to plant native grasses following soybeans, you need to be aware that there are some special weed problems associated with glyphosate resistance that you're going to have to be prepared to deal with. For instance, mare's tail, pigweeds, Ladina clover or white clover are all weeds that have fairly high resistance to glyphosate and can persist following even several years of soybean production. So when you plant following soybeans, be prepared ahead of time to deal with these weeds. Site selection for establishing native grasses is very important, particularly trying to find places where there's low weed pressure. But if you're trying to convert an old pasture, one that's kind of worn out like what you see here in front of me, then you don't have much choice in the matter. You have to deal with the weed pressure that's in front of you. And again, for old pastures, this is a very common, very typical problem. We have common Bermuda grass in here, we have goosegrass, we have cuckleburr, we have spiny amaranth, and no doubt dozens of other weed species that once we kill this current sod are going to express themselves. So it's absolutely critical when doing pasture conversion to be prepared ahead of time to do weed control that allow you to be successful when the time comes to actually put the drill in the ground. The Bermuda grass, things like Johnson grass, goosegrass, the broadleaf species, all can best be controlled late in the growing season before a frost, so August and September. Don't wait till the spring you're actually going to plant to address these weed problems. They need to be controlled now.